So let's get started. So welcome to Design at Large, and it is my great pleasure to present Professor Margaret Burnett, who is here from Oregon State University. So Professor Burnett is a distinguished professor at Oregon State University. So that job title, if you just, basically if you see someone who's a distinguished professor, that should tell you everything. So very, very, very few people make it to that level. So our very own Jim Holland recently was also promoted to distinguished professor. So most people, retire never having become a distinguished professor. So whenever you see someone with that job title, go and talk to them because that means they know everything. They basically have, invented entire fields. And so I don't need to, summarize her resume that she put in the talk bio because, that says it all. So Professor Burnett's work is really spanning both the study of software engineering, and also study of human-computer interaction and design. And I first knew about her work in grad school because I started off doing software engineering, programming languages sort of work, and I slowly pivoted into doing HCI and design work. So, her work and the work of her colleagues were really influential for me. And out of her many, many awards, I want to highlight two in particular that I think is really relevant here. Is one, so she recently won two really distinguished undergraduate research mentoring awards, which is a really big deal. This is, all these professors around the U.S. And even other countries vie for this. And so she won the undergraduate research mentoring award in 2017 for the Computing Research Association, which is one of the main research associations. And then she also won an award recently, a few years ago, for NCWIT, which is the National Center for Women in Information Technology. So she won an award there as well. So I'm really, really looking forward to the talk. I was talking to her earlier today. I was saying she could have given a talk on several major topics, but the one that she's talking about today is super interesting. So with that, please welcome.
Thank you, Philip. So that's his way of saying, man, she is really, really old because she's done stuff. But I do want to bring up a glass ceiling point just because you brought up the distinguished professor thing. So guess how many women in my university have, in computer science, have ever been named distinguished professor? Yeah, one. Guess how many in the whole College of Engineering have ever been named distinguished professor? One. Okay, but those glass ceilings are gone. Yay! So here we go. Speaking of glass ceilings, gender-inclusive software. So thank you for coming to this. This is my Change the World mission, and so I'm totally passionate about this, as I'm sure you'll be able to tell. In fact, I'm even hoping that maybe some of you will want to join in this Change the World effort. So we'll see if I can entice you into my world. So let's start with computing in society. Computing has a lot to think about. This society has automation displaced angry blue-collar workers out there. We have the whole social media of interest to you bubble that I'm sure you've all heard about. We have a sort of a head-in-the-sand culture within computing engineering, which is, my job is to do good tech, not to worry about what that does to society. That's somebody else's problem. And so all of this racks up what I think of as social debt. Some of you have maybe heard about technical debt, which is when you do hacks in software just to get to a certain deadline and all those things mount up and sooner or later the software is unmaintainable. Well, so this is social debt. Suddenly, our society is in big trouble, and a lot of it got created by us. Not on purpose, but there it is. So that's the bad news. The good news is we have a way to solve this because computing is power, okay? If anybody can solve some of these things, it's the people who are creating the technology, and that's us. So it's not like we can wait for somebody else to fix these things. It's us. So how are we going to do this? Well, now that you're all feeling really bad and guilty, I have the answer for you. You can start using GenderMag. All right, so GenderMag is a method, I'll tell you about it in a minute, that's about finding issues of unconscious bias in software itself that gets in the way of people's ability to get software done. So does software actually support a variety of smart users? Well, here's a smart user. And sometimes software supports people like him reasonably well. Sometimes it doesn't. But no, there are lots of other smart users that software doesn't tend to be very supportive of. And what we would like is for software to be supportive of the problem-solving work and efforts of all of these people. So what I want to do here is raise your awareness of unconscious bias at the surface level, the level the user sees of software. I'm not talking about statistics and stuff under the hood. I'm talking about over the hood. Okay? And I'm going to do this concretely with a method that I call GenderMag. And its purpose is to help you find gender inclusiveness issues in the software that you build or design or do something with. So I'm going to see if I can make you care, but I hope that you already do. All the same, if you do already care, these are talking points for you to take away and give to your peers. So reason number 1, society's health. So I hope everybody in this room can just go with these premises that bias in software is a bad thing and that diversity of thought is a good thing for our whole society. So there's a little picture of diversity of thought. You have people looking at that thing on the ground and all thinking different things. So there's been a ton of research about how valuable diversity of thought is to the creativity of groups, to the quality of output of groups in research, in business, in the bottom line. I mean, this is one reason why corporations, this is the reason why corporations are so into diversity these days. It's not because they necessarily want to be good citizens, although maybe some of them do, but it's because it makes their bottom line better, okay? So they know this, and we know this. So how can we make software then be a helpful factor rather than a hindrance to diversity of thought? Well, it seems like we have only 2 choices, and one of them is, in order to make the software fit everybody's styles, we can fix all the people and force them to think exactly the way the software would like them to think. Usually this gets a laugh. Ha 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 ha. Except since you're here in the design lab, you probably already realize that this is what we're doing right now. Okay? So that's why it's not funny. So what we'd rather do is fix the software to support diverse ways of problem solving. But maybe you don't care about society's health. Okay, fine. Let's talk about money. So reason number 2 to care about this is that women drive 70 to 80% of consumer purchasing right now, and this is according to a very recent article in Forbes magazine. In fact, the Harvard Business Review very recently identified women as the largest emerging market. Their purchasing power is considered to be twice China's plus India's GDP combined. Okay? Yes?
Is this 70% of consumer purchasing in America or the world?
The world.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. It's considered the world's largest growth opportunity. But in fact, it's even bigger than these graphs show. Because women have multiplier effects. As the primary caregivers in most societies, people give women their money to spend for them. You know, go buy me some groceries, go buy me some clothes, go buy me some toothpaste. And so they're spending even more money than their own money. So it's a huge growth opportunity. So it would be nice if the software and technologies that we're making appeal to women as well as men. Okay, but maybe you don't care about money either. That's okay. Reasons 3 and 4. I promise I won't go through too many more of these. We know, because we're here in an academic setting, that ignorance is not bliss. And we know it especially well in computing fields because as educators we managed to have a big role in pushing all the women out of computer science, you know, somewhere in the 80s. So, and that wasn't on purpose, it was just ignorance. Okay? So putting our heads in the sand is not going to be a good thing. We've got to do something. Reason number 4, studying a population segment that's underrepresented can help everybody. And this is the classic curb cuts example. If you've already seen it, just bear with me, but I love it so much I'm not going to skip it. That's a curb cut. It's those cutout places in the sidewalk. Somebody way back when noticed a person with a wheelchair having a terrible problem with ordinary sidewalks that did not at that time have curb cuts. And they said, gosh, this is terrible. And curb cuts were born. And they did help people in wheelchairs. And they helped people with those strollers with wheels, or those walkers with wheels too. People like Philip with his little scooter thing. And they helped women, mothers pushing babies in strollers. And they helped people on bicycles. And they helped people pushing great big heavy bales of hay with their dollies. And they helped the few people in the world that have those suitcases with wheels. Okay? So studying one underserved segment of the population opens the door to making the world better for everyone. Okay, enough with the reasons. What do I do? Well, let's start with what not to do. Shrink it and pink it. This is a real thing. You can find this by searching. Shrink it and pink it. It's not a strategy. How many of you have run across Dell's pink laptop circa 2009? Okay? Yeah, they decided, gee, we'd sure like some more money. Let's get it from women. I know what we'll do. We'll make our laptops a little smaller and paint them pink. And we'll do a website to go with it too, with things like recipes and stuff. So that's what they did in 2009. Guess how long that website lasted? Just guess.
2 months.
Guess again, shorter. Guess again.
2 weeks.
Guess again.
2 days.
Guess again.
2 lives.
Guess again. 20 minutes. The outbreak was so great, it lasted 20 minutes. Okay, so they learned their lesson. Here's Bic for her. Maybe you've run across this one. This one's really fun. The Bic people decided they wanted money from women, and so they added pink and purple and sparklies. And a label that says Bic for her. Have you seen the blog about this? Oh, my feeble hand. Before Bic for her came along, I couldn't use ink pens, but now. Okay, so that went over really well. So what is wrong with this kind of strategy? Well, it says we do want your money. Here's a surface level gesture that shows we have absolutely no interest in thinking about you or trying to support you. We just want your money. So that's not going to work. And by the way, if anybody starts suggesting that, gee, you know, we need to be more supportive of women, let's paint some walls pink or something, please gag and say, no, that won't work. So the next place that some people get to at this point in the presentation is they say, well, okay, then I guess that means we need a pink version of software and a blue version of software. But that doesn't work either. And I don't even mean that in the sense of painting things pink and blue. I mean two interfaces. But the trouble is that doesn't work because there aren't any typical females out there in the world. And there aren't any typical males out there in the world because there's just no such thing as typicalness. It's all just so complex with so many variables. You know, you can't manufacture one of those. And so if you did that, you'd have not one interface that was not inclusive, but two interfaces that were not inclusive at double the cost to develop and maintain. So that's not going to work either. So what that tells you is it's got to be about inclusiveness. There's no other solution. So how do we get there? So I'm going to tell you about this method called the GenderMag method. GenderMag stands for Gender Inclusiveness Magnifier. And it is a process to evaluate software tools inclusiveness in the setting of problem solving. So let me just tell you a little bit more about that scope. Originally, when we started GenderMag, we said it's for problem solving software. You know, so like IDEs, debuggers, spreadsheets, you know, decision support systems, visualization packages, stuff like that, you know, problem solving settings. And it works great in those settings, but there's another setting we hadn't really thought about, and that is settings that are just for ordinary mundane stuff like shopping or chat rooms or whatever, in which the user interfaces are so obtuse the users are having to problem solve. Okay? So anytime the person sitting in front of the computer is having to problem solve, this is the right setting to be using this method, because it's all about problem solving. So what it has is personas, and these personas are pretty unusual. and you'll meet one of them very shortly. The personas are based on 5 gender inclusiveness facets, and you'll meet a couple of those shortly too. And nothing else about the persona actually matters. Their names don't matter, their appearances don't matter, their job titles don't matter, where they live doesn't matter, only the 5 facets matter. In order to take these these personas and put them into a process, we've used a gender-specialized cognitive walkthrough. And so there may be some of you who know what cognitive walkthroughs are. If not, you'll sort of pick it up. And so that embeds the facets and the personas into a process. So let's see, we have 4 personas, Abby, Tim, and the Pats. And the Pats are identical twins. Okay, so first, before I kind of delve into those things, let me just give you a flyby on how the method actually works. So you start by picking a persona, one of these personas in our collection. So I pick Abby. Done. Okay? Then what you do next is there's some software tool that you're trying to evaluate, and so you pick a use case or a scenario that you want to evaluate in that tool. And so here's the software that we're going to evaluate very quickly. This is a navigator for a bookstore. So you're using this to find your way around some physical bookstore. Think of it as Google Maps for my bookstore. And some students in one of my junior level classes built this, and when you find strangenesses about the interfaces, well, you know, they're still learning. Anyway, and so the use case that they picked was find science fiction books. So Abby wants to find science fiction books. That's the situation they're going to evaluate. And then what you do is you walk through this scenario via the intended subgoals and actions as follows. And so by intended, I mean the things that the developer of that software wanted them to want to do. Okay, so it's not necessarily what Abby does want to do, but this is what they had in mind. All right, so the first subgoal we're going to think about is CMAP. So what they wanted is when Abby's looking at this screen and trying to find her way around the bookstore to find science fiction books, they wanted in her head the subgoal, I want to see a map. So that's where we are, CMAP. And so then what we do is we answer this question, which is a modified version of a cognitive walkthrough question. And so the subgoal is, I want to see a bookstore map. And what we ask ourselves is, will Abby have formed this subgoal? Not some arbitrary user, not you, not me, not the developers, but Abby. And you answer this question with yes, no, or maybe. So maybe is an addition we've added to this method because what we're after here is diversity of thought in the room as well. So we want everybody in the room who's doing that evaluation to weigh in with yes or no or maybe or multiple opinions. And the thing is, you don't have to agree. You just write them all down. And then later on, you'll decide that some number of them are important and they'll go into your bugs list or whatever. But for now, we're just collecting. Yes, no, or maybe, and why. And so this is another thing that we do here in this specialized version is we point you to particular problem-solving facets that are present in the Abby persona to make sure that you're answering the questions fully embracing what Abby represents. So that's what we do. We answer that about the subgoal, and once we're done, we force that subgoal into her head. So maybe it wasn't there before, but it's there now. She's got that subgoal. And we do that so that we can move on to the next step of the evaluation. So then the next step is to carry out that subgoal. What the designer had in mind is that Abby should want to press browse off. Okay, they're juniors. I don't know why you would push browse off if you wanted to see a map, but this is what they had in mind, and so this is what they wanted Abby to do. Okay, fine. So that's the question we'll answer. Will Abby know what to do at this stage? Yes, no, maybe, and why? Again, it suggests relevant facets for you. And after you've harvested all those opinions and written them down, we take her hand, of course she's not a real person, so we're just doing it in our heads, and force her to push that button. And so then she gets whatever you get when you push the button, and then we say, will Abby see progress toward that sub-goal? Yes, no, maybe, or why. That's it. You just do it till you're done with the scenario. So that's how it works, and when you're done, you've written down issues about where Abby might have gotten into trouble. Or you could have done it with Tim or Pat, and then you'd write down issues where they get into trouble, and then you decide what you want to fix and what matters to you. So that's the method. It's an inspection method. You can use it with, and by the way, this is not for sale. This is all free, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. You can use it with any software that you can walk through. So that means design mock-ups are fine. You know, it can be something executable, but then you've spent a lot of money building it. Yeah. Oh, here's one of the things one of my participants in some study said. They said, no, she's not going to push that button because she's disinclined to push and poke. And that comes directly off of the tinkering facet. All right, so here we are. Here are these 4 personas, as I mentioned, and the 5 facets that we talk about are the motivations. So not how motivated the people are, but what motivations they have, their reasons for sitting in this chair, okay, to do this problem on the computer. Information processing style, computer self-efficacy, which is a form of confidence, risk aversion, and their learning style in learning new kinds of technologies, tinkering or something different. So those are the facets, and I'm going to introduce you to just a couple of them. But first, look, this is our persona. Don't try to read it. Tiny little font. So what we intended for this method is that it would work even for software developers. But software developers sometimes don't really like personas because they're kind of mushy and big and long. And so we wanted bullets and short and underlined and structured so that a software developer would be able to get right to the stuff they wanted. So all I really want you to notice is this stage is it fits on one slide, if you have small enough font. Okay, second thing was that fun line. Let's do it again, it's so fun. Okay, there's a top and a bottom. The top is totally irrelevant. Okay? You can put in anything you want. We call these multi-personas for that reason. So Abby can look like this Abby, or this Abby, or this Abby, or even this Abby, or any other picture you want. And Abby can live in Wales or somewhere else and can be any age and can have any job title. All that stuff you can change. And so what you could do is if you had software that was aimed for, let's say, any smartphone user, then you might choose a variety of age groups, but you wanted them all to be Abbies and all have the same problem-solving style of some sort, and then you might pick a whole bunch of Tims that were that way too, and so they might have different backgrounds. One's a housewife, and somebody else is a janitor, and somebody else is a professor, and somebody else is a CEO, and you can do that. Okay? Because the top doesn't matter. What matters is the bottom. The bottom, you can't change at all. And so I'm going to tell you about the first facet. Facet number 1, attitude toward risk. So this is one of these 5 problem-solving facets. Abby rarely has spare time. And so she's risk-averse about using unfamiliar technologies because she doesn't have time to fiddle around. She's just trying to get something done. So in that sense, she's risk averse. There are a ton of different studies about risk aversion and individual differences in risk aversion and how they come together by gender. So all of our facets are backed by at least 5 independent studies. So 5 per facet at least. And I'm only going to show you one study just to give you an idea of what the data behind these things can look like. So here's one study. It was a survey about risk aversion with technology. And so as you would guess, the pink are the females and the blue are the males. And so the first thing to notice, and so then down along the x-axis, we have most tolerant kind of in the middle, and then the most averse to risk in technology. First thing to notice is look how much overlap there is. Okay? Lots and lots of men and women that have the same attitudes toward risk. So this is another reinforcement toward, we don't have a pink world and a blue world. Okay, people are all over the map. But the second thing to notice is the distributions are very different. Okay? So what we do have is statistical differences showing how individual differences have these kind of gendered clusters. And so as personas, Tim's job is to look out for the interests of all of these people over here, male or female, who are the most tolerant to risk. And Abby's job is to look out for the interests of this 38% of the females and 29% of the males who are very risk averse with technology. And the Pat's job is to look out for the interests of the people in the middle. So that's what they're supposed to do. And so now I've added this black line right there separating Tim from the rest. So what this black line does is it says if by chance you were developing software that only supported fairly risk-tolerant people, your software would be supporting almost half the men in this sample, but only a quarter of the women. Okay? And so what that shows is this method is both about gender and not about gender. I mean, it's really not about gender, it's about cognitive styles. But if you ignore these cognitive styles, who you're disadvantaging is mostly women. Okay? Okay, that was facet number 1. I'll do one more. Boy, this isn't really going that fast, is it? Okay, I told you I tend to wax poetic. All right, information processing style. So when people have problems, they often feel like they need to gather more information. And there are multiple ways of doing this. And one way is in teeny little iterations, okay? And another way is in burstier bits, so a batch of information, and then a batch of action, acting upon that, and then maybe another batch of information. So those are the 2 types we'll talk about. Data, okay, this is crazy data, but I'll show you what it is. So this is one male at the top and one female at the bottom. Both of them were very successful in a spreadsheet debugging task. And don't worry about grokking all this, I'll read it to you. The only thing that I really want you to know so far is that this stuff down here, these 3 pastel colors, are about gathering information, and then the 3 bright colors are about acting upon it in trying to get these spreadsheet things going. All right, so first thing I want you to notice is these horizontal black arrows that I just put up there. I'll just kind of blink them a couple times. So this is the longest period of time this guy spent gathering information without doing something about it. So he used this very incremental style. What he likes to do is gather a tiny little bit of information and then act on it, gather a little more, act on it, very tight little iterations. It's a totally good style. He was our most successful male and one of our 2 most successful participants. Now look at those black arrows for the females, or the female. Her shortest period of gathering information before acting is longer than his longest. Okay? So she likes to gather big batches of information so that she knows what's going on and how she wants to proceed, and then act in batches, okay, like this clump here, and then go back for another batch if she needs it. Perfectly good problem-solving style as well. They're both good. And she was our most successful female and the other of the 2 most successful. In fact, these 2 were equally successful. Now, let's look at mistakes. So these red rectangles that I've added here around the hollow stars. So the solid stars, those are formula bugs that he actually fixed. And the hollow stars are things he thought were bugs and he fiddled with them, but he actually broke them. Okay? So you can see he made a lot of mistakes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wow, 6, 7 mistakes. Okay? That's a lot of mistakes. But he expects to make mistakes. This is part of that style. He considers it experimentation. He knows he can fix it. And in fact, he was very successful. Now, I've just highlighted all of her mistakes. There aren't any. Okay? That's characteristic of this style. In this style, you learn enough to do it right the first time. Okay? So that's a big plus to this style. A big minus to this style is it's cognitively heavier. Okay? You have to carry around a lot more in your brain. So neither style is better or worse. They're just different. Guess what software supports? Only this one. I won't even start on what it takes to try to do her style in Excel, but you can ask me about it in the Q&A if you want. Okay, I want to tell you about a field study. So this one, we had 3 companies in the real world. Actually, it's 4 teams though, because one of the companies had teams at different branches. Anyway, and so they used GenderMag themselves on their own software, and we came and watched. And so all I really want you to notice here is that there was quite a variety of setups here. So Agency G, had males and females, developers and managers. Company E had only males, only developers, so on and so forth. Big variety of who was there, variety in which personas they used, variety in the domains of their software, variety in the life of their software. The oldest was 10 years old, the new was pre-released, and varieties in the kind of users they were envisioning. So here's what they found. This is all of them together, and this is the average. And so the y-axis, if we play a little fast and loose with definitions, is the features, the percent of the features they found these things in. And so up here, the 55% says, on average, 55% of the features they looked at in this way, they found some kind of usability error. Now, it's a cognitive walkthrough. And cognitive walkthroughs do find all kinds of usability errors, and not just things that have some tie to gender. And so in the gray, this is those. So just kind of standard usability errors like, there's no contrast, I can't even read it, the font's too small, stuff like that. That's in here. This part, the 25%, is the gender inclusiveness issues they found. So by this I mean, they found something that they said somebody who was risk averse would not push that button, okay? Or somebody with an information processing style like Abby's would have trouble here, okay? So if they're tying it to the facets, it's a gender inclusiveness issue. 25%, that's 1 out of 4. They found this in their own software. I didn't do this, okay? I just sat there and watched. They found that in software they love. Isn't that horrible? Don't you think that's horrible? 1 out of 4? Yes, okay, we have a few yeses. I think it's horrible, but guess what? It's even worse. The latest average after that time, I got a bunch more teams, 32%, 1 out of 3. Pretty cool, huh? Look at this one. Isn't that fun? Is that good news or bad news that they found it in 100% of the features they looked at? Actually, I mean, it's bad news that it was there, but it's good news in that they found it super early. So this was at such an early design stage that the designers had just walked in the room with it, and they did this thing. And as they walked through it with GenderMag, they found gender inclusiveness issues in every single thing they looked at. So they didn't waste a dime implementing it, okay? Back to square one. So they saved a bunch of money by finding things that early. Here's just a little bit about what the teams looked like when they did this kind of work. And so one of the things that they really noticed is it's all about diversity. So they discovered this, every single team discovered this on their own. They didn't say, oh, men are this way and males are that way. In fact, they said things like this. It's not really about gender, is it? It's people differences, okay? Bingo, that's exactly what we want them to think, because it's true. It revealed things they'd never noticed. This guy said it makes it easy to do these things, and in fact, this was the team that had no usability people in the room at all. It was just developers, and they said, yeah, I get it. And they got religion about it, and 2 weeks later, they'd fixed 3 of the issues that they'd found. So that was Team E. And by the way, this is our Chi 16 paper, in case you want more stuff on this. But I want to skip ahead to another one. So I did a year-long field study with Microsoft using a method called action research, which some of you may have heard of. It's a very hands-on form of field study. And so the 2 big things to know about that is that the treatment changes throughout. So this is not a hands-off, we place this in here, we take our hands away and then go later and measure it. We make changes all along. When they find issues, we fix it, and so on and so forth. The second thing is the participants are researchers too, okay? So they help shape the way things turn out. So there's a picture of the Microsoft campus. In case you haven't been there, all I'm really trying to point out is, boy, is this huge. There are over 100 buildings, even in that picture, which is an old picture. And so what we were interested in is, can we land gender HCI methods, derivatives of GenderMag, in real software in a real company, and if so, how? So I'm only going to tell you about a little bit of what we found. We have a short paper in VLHCC that just came out. So in action research, first you have this unfreeze stage, which is recognizing that we have a problem, we've got to do something. And lucky for me, Microsoft had just hit that. And so what happened is they got a new CEO. And the CEO came up with a new mission statement, and this has been published all over the place. And part of it says, to empower every person on the planet to achieve more. So that's diversity in the product. And the CEO is saying it. Not only was the CEO saying it, he was pushing it down. And he was saying, people who work for me, part of your job is to make this happen, and you will be evaluated on it. And so this is a middle manager saying exactly that. This is coming down to all the managers. So lesson one, what I learned is that inclusiveness accountability has to actually be top down and bottom up. So in some other companies that I've been to, there's a lot of grassroots interest in this. But unless the top levels are saying this is part of your day jobs, it becomes a hobby, and nobody has time for hobbies because you got your day jobs. But here we had the push coming from both directions. You also need the grassroots to care about it too, otherwise they'll find some sort of excuse. And we had that, so it was like a perfect moment. So then you get into the change stage. So let's try this, let's try that. So surprise, gender is politically perilous. Who knew? So people would naysay it. You know, at first there would be teams that would be all excited, and then it's like, what? You're going to talk about gender? That's dangerous in this company. You know, you might get fired. You know, we're not allowed to talk about gender. We're not even allowed to collect gender data. I mean, there's all these myths around it, or you know, somebody might get offended, or you know, it doesn't matter here. Our software won't need it, or we have a developer on our team who's a female, so we won't need it, you know. And so all these things, or you know, gee, I'd love to be able to do it, but we have these deadlines. Okay, so there were all these reasons to not do it. But Team Group A, which was a group of several smaller software teams, really needed it. Because half their target market that they were starting to go after was female, and their product was kind of a mess. And what the team group lead said is, if I can't make this software work for Abby, I will have failed. So it's like, I don't care what everybody says, we got to do this. So they tried it. And the first time they tried it, this was supposed to be just a little introductory run to get them used to it. They didn't actually expect to find anything. 27% of their features, okay? Then when they went into the harder ones, they exceeded 50% of their features. So the word spread. Other teams started doing it. And so one of the things that was really valuable for us is that GenderMag brought a safe way of talking about gender without talking about gender, risk aversion, tech learning style. What about non-tinkerers? Okay, so you could bring up these cognitive issues without ever saying the G word, okay, and it was safe. So that was a huge win, and is probably what enabled it to keep going. So there's a phase in action research called refreezing, but I don't think we're even there yet, but we can talk about some impacts. So 12 teams that were willing to tell me anything, because I don't work for Microsoft, how much are they allowed to say, had changed their products. One participant said, I rewrote the compiler error messages, and that's what I'll call product X. Product D said, I'm working on feature in the next version. Actually, this was a very big feature set. In the team group A, they actually redesigned their whole interface and got extremely positive responses from everyone. Experienced, novices, males, females. In fact, he tells a story. He says, you know, usually when we redesign something, he says, customers hate it. You know, they just hate it because they don't like change. And so at first, all our metrics are down. And so we go into these meetings and we remind everybody in the meeting, okay, we have to expect this. It always happens when you redesign, you know, your ratings tank, and then they go up eventually. But he says, we don't have to do that. They go up right away. So yeah, it's just awesome. They actually built what they call a brag wall. Things turned out so well. So, GenderMag goes to college. That's you. So we're now starting a GenderMag education research project in which we're trying to understand what it takes to teach GenderMag in different settings at the college level. Within, say, for example, HCI classes or software engineering classes. One person is actually doing it in a game design class. And so we have a wiki with, let's face it, very alpha level stuff available for anyone. You'll notice this is kind of a horrible URL. That's kind of on purpose. We don't have it linked to anything yet, but it is discoverable and you can go download from it if you're so inclined. But if you're interested in helping us gather data about this so that we can enrich what's going on and you want to try it in your classes, please, please, please do, and let me know and we'll ask to interview you before and after because we really want it out there. Here's some of the stuff on the wiki. We have some sort of motivation stuff, lecture slides, in-class activities, handouts, homeworks, readings, stuff like that. Depends on what style you like to teach in. And even more materials, reading assignments, slides, a video. All right, so in conclusion, the time may be right for gender HCI methods in business and in the classroom. It pays off in both the business case and the social justice case. And so here are just a couple more quotes from the Microsoft study. One person said, I learned a way to think to address issues that will benefit everyone, but especially women. And somebody else said, it changed the way I think. So that's it. Join the fun. If you're in business, please start using GenderMag on your software. If you're not in business, but you're still building software, please start using GenderMag on your software. If you're teaching, please consider teaching it in your classes. It's a good way to teach personas. It's a good way to teach cognitive walkthroughs. It's a good way to teach inclusive design. And here's a whole bunch of resources. And I'm open for questions.
Yeah.